So you want to know how to prolong the life of your Mercedes suspension. You want to know how to avoid costly bills. If yes, ladies and gentlemen, sit closer. In today's video, I'm going to tell you all about Mercedes suspension and how to make them last forever. Hello, my name is Elvin and welcome to Accent on Cars. If you are new to the channel, on this channel I do general car reviews, I make how-to videos, and for used cars I talk about common issues, reliability, things to look out for when buying a used car so you make an informed decision. This is how this video is going to be organized. At first I'm going to be talking about Mercedes models equipped with air suspension, and then we're going to be talking about regular Mercedes suspensions. And unlike many other YouTubers, I'm not going to ask you to smash anything, I'm not going to ask you to subscribe anything, but I do ask you to stay through the entire video because you're going to find a lot of value by the end of this video. And if you like the video useful, you'll naturally like and subscribe, right? Unless you're a jerk. Alright, let's start with the Mercedes airmatic suspension first. What's an airmatic? Airmatic is a Mercedes brand name for air suspension. So some of the cars like W211 AMGs have air suspension on all four corners or MLs. Some other cars may have air suspension just in the front, like the wagons or W212 AMGs, etc. Should you be afraid of having a Mercedes with air suspension? The short answer is absolutely not. I think air suspension is one of the best suspension setups available in Mercedes, and some people are afraid of the airmatic problems. They buy airmatic, they run into some issues, they don't know what to do, and they convert them to coilovers, thus ruining the ride quality. What is this setup about? Like, what are the major components of air suspension or airmatic? So you have air springs, like I said, or the air shocks and springs combined in one unit on all four corners or on two corners. You have airmatic compressor, that's an air compressor that pumps air into the system. You have a valve, control valve that kind of like opens and closes each valve to inflate or deflate each side. And you have an airmatic filter. And you also have air lines running to each of the air springs. I'm simplifying it. Obviously, there are like a bunch of sensors. There's the speed sensor, other sensors, relay, etc. And traditional for Mercedes or for most cars, usually air suspension in the front is a single unit, meaning the strut and air spring are combined into the single unit. The suspension, air suspension in the back, the air spring is separated from the shock. So shock and air spring are two separate units. And usually the shock outlasts the air spring. So how frequently does the airmatic system fail? The front struts, at least on these early models, can fail somewhere between 60 to 100,000 miles. The ones in the rear last longer. They usually do not fail until like 100,000 miles. And the reason for that is because the front ones obviously get the most use. You know, you drive it spiritedly, go into the turns, so they wear out quicker. And what are the factors affecting the lifetime and longevity of the air springs? That it's the mileage and the time. Both of those factors are critical and affect the life of the units. So if you, let's say, put 100,000 miles in 1-2 years on your car, likely your air suspension will be just fine. If you put 40,000 miles over 25 years, likely they will fail. So both time and mileage is important. But what's the major cause of this problem? So why do the air springs fail in the first place? And the quick answer is that nature, environment is your enemy. Rubber units over time, they dry, they're not like as soft, they don't flex, and they start developing micro, in some cases macro cracks on them. And when that happens, you will come up to your car, you will see that your car has slammed a little bit overnight. Now, dropping a little bit if you don't drive your car for too long is normal on these engines. It's understandable. The valves kind of like let go of the excessive pressure to level the car, so forth. That should never look like a lowrider. If you come up to your car after 3, 4, 5 days of not driving it and it's slammed to the ground, you have a leak in your system somewhere. And you have to diagnose for that immediately. The reason you should inspect your car immediately is because if you don't do, a smaller problem will become a larger problem. But you don't have to panic. If the car drops or airmatic behaves weirdly, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a leak right away. So for example, I had an issue one time where I would get a sporadic airmatic error message. The car would not lower itself, it would hold the height, even if I didn't drive it for extensive period of time. But occasional like airmatic errors would pop up. So the error was speed sensor, lateral speed sensor or G-force sensor related. Let me show you where that is. So it's basically this guy, this little guy, at least in W211 AMG, on each side where you have your air strut tower. This is the top of the air strut, and as you can see, the line comes to it. There's this like lateral acceleration sensor. So I had an sporadic error on this. Resetting it had fixed my problem. It's been about 2 or 3 years. So not every problem necessarily means that you have a leak right away. But when you do have a leak, you have a leak. It will be obvious. It will fall. So diagnosing the front strut is somewhat easy. You can like spray soapy water on it to see if the air is kind of like leaking anywhere. Unfortunately, testing the rear ones is not so easy because the rubber is insulated in like protective cover, so you can't really kind of like spray water on it to see if air is leaking. So the key message I want you to hear is that if you have a micro leak and the car drops over a few days, do not ignore it. If you do, like dust particles will get into the system and they will work as an abrasive, making that small leak a bigger leak. It's not gonna heal itself. If you don't fix it now, you will have to fix it soon, but you also run into the risks of damaging your compressor. Why? Because when the air leaks, right, compressor works extra hard. This compressor is not designed to run continuously. It's designed to run for a little bit, pressurize the system, shut off. If there's a leak, it's gonna run continuously. It will fry itself. Now that's an additional like 500 to 1000, depending on who does the labor and the parts available, you can encounter. And compressor, by the way, on W211 at least is located under the bumper over here on the left side or the driver's side for the US cars. So with that aside, tip number 2 is to keep your suspension elements clean. I like hosing it off because all the salt, dirt, not only does it shorten the life of the rubber in the air springs, it makes it like hard like plastic, but it also like if there are micro cracks, those dust particles, as I talked about earlier, will get into the system. Next tip, airmatic filter. I made a video on how to replace the airmatic filter. You can find that link in the description box down below. But it's important to replace the airmatic filter, especially if you had a leak in the system and you had to replace the springs, because you don't want any like dust, dirt particles flying through the lines into the system, getting into the valve, getting into the compressor, etc. So that filter is designed to catch that all. One more tip for airmatic suspension owners is make sure you switch between comfort, sport 1, sport 2, or race position every once in a while. Let those like rubber components in your air springs stretch and shrink so they don't dry out and become like a plastic. If you don't know how to fix and diagnose an airmatic system yourself, find a reputable shop. You won't believe how many times people have chased problems without success, spending a lot of money throwing parts at it only because the person diagnosing it was not knowledgeable. And eventually people give up. They remove the airmatic, put coilovers, ruining their daily comfort and adjustability. So find a reputable shop that knows the airmatic system and can take care of it. All right, so enough speaking about the airmatic. I hope that was useful, that was relevant. Now let's talk about suspension in general. A lot of people, when they see a pothole or patches on the road, or a little bit of kind of like suboptimal road conditions, they slow really down. They go really slowly over those bumps. You really do not have to. This is not your girl's titties. You don't have to be gentle and tender with it. Enjoy your car. And I don't mean driving your car like a rental car. What I mean is that the suspension is made out of premium materials, strong materials, designed to carry this 2-ton machine at 200 miles an hour. Actually, in certain cases, if you hit that pothole slowly or slower, you're hurting your suspension a lot more than if you pass it at a higher speed, because if you hit a pothole at a higher speed, you kind of like glide over it. If you go slowly, you actually fall into it, and that's why you hear that knocking sound from the suspension. So the rims are dirty and filthy, but I want you to understand something. If it hits this pothole, let's say the pothole is like this much deep, right? The diameter of the pothole is lower than your tire, the car will handle that pothole just fine. But if the pothole is a little deeper, let's say the diameter of the pothole is all the way to this side of the rim, then you may either, depending on the speed and how harsh you hit it, you may have either a blown tire or bent rim. If the pothole is the mother of all potholes, like we have over here in Massachusetts, it's steep and the diameter of the pothole is basically on the same line as the center of the wheel. That's when hitting a pothole becomes an insurance call. But like I said earlier, do not worry about kind of like waves on the road, anything. Drive your car just fine. Ever wonder why taxi or cab drivers squeeze 200,000 miles out of their suspensions and your suspension that you've been babying fails at 50? It's because exactly of that reason. Cab drivers drive their cars. They let the system work. They let the bushings and control arms move and remain their plasticity. If it doesn't move, then things dry up and become really brittle. That's the reason why if a car, let's say, has been garaged for years, never driven, you drive it and all the plastic, all the rubber components have turned into plastic because they didn't get to move, they didn't get to exercise, flex their muscles. I hope that's clear. So I hope this video was useful and informative for you guys, and if that's the case, let me know down in the comments and let me know what other video you would like me to make, what topics you would like me to cover, and I'll see you in the future episodes. And remember what I told you in the beginning of the video about smashing the like or subscribing?